A woman stranded. A cowboy's question. A promise that changed everything. In 1882, at a dusty California train station, Evelyn Whitmore sat frozen on a wooden bench, betrayed, penniless, and 3,000 miles from home. The job offer that brought her west was a lie. The address didn't exist. Her money was gone. As darkness fell and the platform emptied, one man noticed her desperation. Rowan Calloway, a weathered rancher with his own scars, asked a simple question that would ignite a love neither expected and a legacy that would outlast them both. This is a story of survival, trust, and the courage to begin again when everything falls apart. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The November sun hung low over Ventura, California, casting long shadows across the train platform as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Dust devils spun lazy circles in the street beyond, and the smell of creosote and coal smoke hung thick in the air. The westbound train had departed 2 hours ago. The eastbound wouldn't arrive until tomorrow morning. Between those two certainties sat a woman who belonged to neither. Evelyn Whitmore had been sitting on the same bench since dawn. Her emerald traveling dress, once fine enough for Boston society, was now wrinkled and stained with the grime of 6 days aboard rattling train cars. Her auburn hair, pinned with deliberate care that morning, had begun to slip from its arrangement, wisps falling across her pale forehead. She clutched a worn carpet bag on her lap with both hands, knuckles white, as if releasing it might mean surrendering the last thread of dignity she possessed. She had watched the station transform throughout the day. Morning had brought businessmen in pressed suits, their pocket watches glinting as they checked the time with practiced impatience. Midday saw families with squalling children and mountains of luggage, mothers fussing over hems and fathers counting tickets. Afternoon thinned the crowd to drifters and dusty ranch hands, men who moved with the unhurried confidence of those who belonged to this harsh, beautiful country. Now, as shadows lengthened and the temperature began its sharp desert descent, Evelyn sat alone. The station master, a portly man with impressive mutton chops, had asked her 3 times if she needed assistance. The first time she'd smiled politely and assured him she was waiting for someone. The second time she'd simply nodded, not trusting her voice. The third time he'd looked at her with something dangerously close to pity, and she'd turned her face away until he retreated to his office. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She had nowhere to go. The letter was still in her bag, folded and refolded so many times the creases had worn soft as cloth. She didn't need to read it again. Every word was burned into her memory. Dear Miss Whitmore, your qualifications are precisely what our household requires. Upon your arrival in Ventura, proceed to 47 Sycamore Lane where lodging has been arranged. Your duties as governess will commence immediately. Transportation and first month's wages will be provided upon arrival. Sincerely, Mrs. Hartford Chen. 47 Sycamore Lane didn't exist. Evelyn had walked the entire length of Sycamore Lane twice, her bag growing heavier with each step, asking at every house, every shop. No one had heard of the Chen family. No one knew of any household seeking a governess. The postmaster had examined the letter and shaken his head slowly. The paper was real enough, the handwriting elegant, but the stamp, he'd pointed with a tobacco-stained finger, had been altered. A fraud, he'd said with genuine regret, not even a sophisticated one. Someone had wanted to lure a desperate woman across the country for reasons Evelyn couldn't fathom and didn't want to imagine. She had 17 cents left. Her trunk, containing everything she owned, was in the station storage room, paid through until tomorrow evening. After that, the station master had explained apologetically, unclaimed luggage would be sold to cover fees. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. 6 months ago, she'd been living in her family's Beacon Hill townhouse, playing piano in the parlor, taking tea with her mother's friends. Then her father had died, and the lawyers had come with their ledgers and sympathetic expressions. The truth had emerged like bones from a shipwreck. There was no money. There never had been. Only debt, carefully concealed behind a facade of gentility. The house belonged to creditors. The furniture would be auctioned. Her mother, fragile even in prosperity, had retreated to her sister's home in Providence, a place with no room for a grown daughter. Evelyn had been left with 2 choices: marry quickly and questionably, or find work. When the letter arrived offering a governess position in California, it had seemed like Providence, a new life in a new place, away from the whispers and pitying glances of Boston society. Now she understood it had been a different kind of trap entirely. A train whistle echoed in the distance, mournful and fading. Evelyn closed her eyes. She could return to Boston, telegraph her mother's sister, beg for coach fare, arrive back east as defeated as she'd left, accept whatever marriage could be arranged to whatever man would take a penniless woman with no prospects. She'd seen those marriages among her mother's friends, women who'd traded their futures for security, whose eyes had gone flat and distant behind their practiced smiles. Or she could stay here in this strange, raw place and hope for, what? Mercy from strangers? Work that wouldn't ask questions? The Western Territories were supposed to offer reinvention, but Evelyn was beginning to understand that reinvention required resources she simply didn't have. The platform was empty now except for shadows. Gas lamps flickered to life along the street, casting pools of yellow light across the dirt road. Somewhere a piano played badly, notes tumbling through the evening air. Laughter erupted from a saloon down the block, rough and male. Evelyn straightened her spine. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not where anyone might see. She'd maintained her composure through her father's funeral, through the auction of her childhood home, through 6 days of hard travel in increasingly rough company. She would maintain it now. Miss? She hadn't heard him approach. Evelyn's head snapped up, and her hand tightened on her bag defensively. The man standing 3 feet away raised both hands slightly, a gesture of peace. Didn't mean to startle you. He was tall, built lean and strong in the way of men who worked hard for their living. Somewhere in his mid-20s, she guessed, though the sun and wind had carved lines around his eyes that might have added years. He wore dusty work clothes, dark trousers, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, a leather vest worn soft with age. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see dark eyes, a strong jaw, and something in his expression that seemed more concerned than threatening. The station's closing soon, he said, his voice quiet and surprisingly gentle. Ain't safe for a lady to be out here alone after dark. I'm perfectly fine, thank you. The words came automatically, the reflexive shield of propriety her mother had drilled into her. Never show weakness, never admit need, never let them see you're drowning. He studied her for a long moment, and Evelyn had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen. His gaze moved from her face to her dress, to the carpet bag clutched in her lap, to the worn heels of her boots visible beneath her hem. He was adding things up, reaching conclusions she didn't want acknowledged. "You've been sitting here all day," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's hardly your concern." "No, ma'am, it ain't." He shifted his weight, and she noticed he moved like someone accustomed to being careful, to not crowding. "But I've been in town since morning, and you haven't moved from that bench since I got here. Station master's worried, asked if I might check on you before I head back to the ranch." So she'd become an object of such obvious pity that strangers were being dispatched to check on her welfare. Heat rose in Evelyn's cheeks. "Please tell him I'm fine. I'm waiting for someone." "Are you?" The question was mild, but it punctured her last defense. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. "No," she whispered. "No, I'm not." The cowboy, because that's clearly what he was, she could see it in every line of him, nodded slowly. He glanced up and down the platform, then back to her face. "Where are you headed, miss?" It was the simplest question in the world. People asked it a dozen times a day at train stations. But in that moment, with evening settling into night and her last coins warming in her pocket and nowhere in the world that wanted her, the question broke something loose. "I don't know," Evelyn said, and was horrified to hear her voice shake. "I came here for a position that doesn't exist. I have no money for lodging. I have—" She stopped, pressed her lips together hard. "I apologize. This isn't your burden." "What kind of position?" "It doesn't matter. It was a lie." He absorbed this, and anger flickered across his features, anger that seemed directed not at her, but at the faceless people who'd engineered her disaster. "You got family back east?" "Not really, not anymore." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "Rowan Calloway." He touched the brim of his hat. I run a cattle ranch about 8 miles north of here. Silver Creek. Evelyn Whitmore. She managed a ghost of her mother's polite smile. From Boston. Long way from home, Miss Whitmore. Boston isn't home anymore. Something in how she said it made him pause. He looked at her again with those too perceptive eyes, and Evelyn had to resist the urge to turn away. She wasn't accustomed to being looked at like this, not with the social calculation of Boston drawing rooms, but with actual attention, as if her answer mattered. The station master emerged from his office, jingling a large ring of keys. "Mr. Calloway, I need to lock up now." Rowan nodded, but kept his attention on Evelyn. "Miss Whitmore, I know you don't know me from Adam, and you got no reason to trust a stranger, but there's a boarding house 2 streets over, run by a woman named of Mrs. Alvarez. She's decent, charges fair rates, and she don't tolerate any trouble. I can walk you there if you're willing." "I can't afford—" "I'll cover tonight's rate," he interrupted. "And tomorrow, if you're willing to hear an offer, we can talk about work." Evelyn stiffened. "What kind of work?" He read her suspicion and didn't flinch from it. "The honest kind. My housekeeper's getting on in years. She could use help with the cooking and cleaning. I ain't got the head for numbers, and my bookkeeping's a disaster. You said you were coming out for a governess position. I'm guessing you can read and write better than most?" "I can keep books," Evelyn said carefully. "I managed my father's household accounts for years." "Then I can use you at the ranch. It ain't glamorous work, and it sure as hell ain't Boston, but it's honest wages for honest labor. Room and board included, and your own space in the main house." It was too much, too quickly, from a complete stranger. Every instinct her mother had instilled warned against accepting help from unknown men, against putting herself in isolated situations, against trusting handsome strangers with easy solutions. But evening was deepening into night. She had 17 cents to her name, and pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Why would you help me?" Evelyn asked bluntly. "You don't know me." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Because about 4 years back, my younger sister got lured out to San Francisco with a similar kind of letter. Promise of work as a seamstress. Turned out to be something a hell of a lot worse." He paused, and grief moved behind his eyes. "We got her out, eventually. She's safe now, living in Colorado with our aunt. But I remember what it was like, finding out she'd been used like that. So when I see a woman stranded at a train station with nowhere to go, I figure maybe I can keep that from happening to someone else." The honesty in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a practiced story or a calculated manipulation. This was personal pain being converted into action. "Mr. Calloway," the station master called again, more insistent. Rowan extended his hand. "Let me help you with your bag." Evelyn looked at his outstretched hand. Calloused, strong, completely sincere. She thought of her alternatives. She thought of Boston, of her mother's sister's cramped spare room, of marrying some elderly merchant who'd take her as a charity case. She thought of everything she'd already lost, and how much further she could still fall. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't charging forward. Sometimes it was accepting help when you desperately needed it. She placed her hand in his. "All right." His grip was warm and steady. He lifted her bag as if it weighed nothing and offered his other arm. After a moment's hesitation, Evelyn took it, letting him help her stand. Her legs had gone stiff from hours of sitting, and she stumbled slightly. Rowan steadied her without comment. "I'll need my trunk from storage," she said. "We'll get it in the morning. Tonight, let's just get you somewhere safe." They walked off the platform together, Rowan matching his pace to her tired, unsteady steps. The station master locked the doors behind them with a rattle of chains. Above, stars were beginning to emerge in a sky bigger and darker than any Evelyn had known in Boston. The air smelled of dust and sage and possibility. Mrs. Alvarez's boarding house was exactly as Rowan had described. A tidy 2-story building with lace curtains in the windows and a well-swept porch. The proprietress herself answered the door, a stout Mexican woman with sharp eyes and an expression that softened when she saw Evelyn's condition. "Dios mío, child, you look half-starved. Come in, come in." She waved them both inside, already moving toward what Evelyn assumed was the kitchen. "I have stew still warm. You'll eat before anything else." "Mrs. Alvarez," Rowan said, "this is Miss Whitmore from Boston. She needs a room for tonight, maybe longer. I'll cover the cost." Mrs. Alvarez looked between them, assessing. She's not in trouble, is she? No, ma'am. Just had some bad luck with a job offer that didn't pan out. Mrs. Alvarez fixed Evelyn with a penetrating stare. You run away from something, girl? No, Evelyn said firmly. I ran toward something that turned out not to exist. The older woman's expression softened further. Ah, yes, I know that story. Too many women know that story. She patted Evelyn's arm. Come. You eat, you rest. Tomorrow you figure out what comes next. Rowan set Evelyn's bag down inside the door. I'll be by in the morning, Miss Whitmore. After breakfast, if you want to talk about that work offer. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I'm making the offer anyway. He tipped his hat to both women. Mrs. Alvarez, thank you for taking her in. Bah, you think I would turn away a girl in need? Go on with you, Rowan Calloway. I know you have a long ride back. He paused at the door, looking back at Evelyn. Get some rest, Miss Whitmore. Things might look different in the morning. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Mrs. Alvarez ushered Evelyn toward the kitchen, keeping up a steady stream of comfortable chatter that required no responses. The boarding house was clean and warm, smelling of herbs and bread. The kitchen was cozy, with copper pots hanging from hooks and a wood stove radiating heat. A bowl of stew appeared in front of Evelyn, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef, accompanied by fresh bread and butter. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her. Her last meal had been yesterday morning, a stale roll purchased at a station stop in the middle of nowhere. Eat, Mrs. Alvarez commanded, settling into a chair across from her. Then we talk, if you want. Or not. But first, you eat. Evelyn ate. The stew was rich and savory, the bread still warm from baking. With food in her stomach and walls around her instead of open sky, some of the day's terror began to recede. She wasn't safe yet. She was still penniless, still stranded, still dependent on the charity of strangers. But she was no longer alone on that platform, watching the sun set with no plan and no hope. This Rowan, Mrs. Alvarez said after Evelyn had finished half the bowl. He is a good man, serious, quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but decent, you understand? When he says he has work, he means real work. When he says room and board, he means a proper room with a lock on the door and food at regular hours. You know him well? Well enough. He comes to town once, maybe twice a month for supplies. Always polite, always pays his bills on time. Lost his parents young, raised his sister himself until she went to live with family. The ranch, she made an approving noise. He built that from almost nothing. Worked himself near to death the first few years, they say. Now it is, what is the word? Successful. Yes, successful. Evelyn absorbed this. Why would a successful rancher need help with bookkeeping? Because cowboys are very good with cows, Mrs. Alvarez said dryly, and very bad with numbers. Also, his housekeeper is my cousin's friend, and she tells me the house is always a mess because Rowan works from dawn until dark outside. He needs help. This is not charity, girl. This is real work he is offering. But he's paying for this room. That's charity. That is kindness. There is a difference. Mrs. Alvarez stood, collecting the empty bowl. You have been taught to be suspicious, yes? This is good, especially for a woman traveling alone. But sometimes people are just kind because they have been where you are. Rowan's sister. She shook her head. That was a bad time. Very bad. Now when he sees someone who needs help, he helps. Simple as that. She showed Evelyn to a small but immaculate room on the second floor. There was a bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a china basin, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto the quiet street. A lock on the door, as promised. Breakfast is at 7, Mrs. Alvarez said. The privy is out back. You need anything in the night? My room is downstairs next to the kitchen. She paused in the doorway. Sleep, child. Tomorrow will still be there when you wake up, and you will face it with food in your belly and rest in your bones. That is always better than facing it empty and exhausted. When the door closed and Evelyn was finally alone, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to shake. The terror she'd held at bay all day crashed over her like a wave. She could have been robbed on that platform, could have been approached by men with worse intentions than Rowan Calloway, could have frozen in the night or been forced into some desperate, degrading bargain. But she hadn't. Somehow, impossibly, she'd been found by someone decent. Evelyn pulled her father's pocket watch from her bag, one of the only things she'd been able to keep from the auction. It had stopped working months ago, frozen at 3:47, but she couldn't bear to part with it. She held it in both hands, feeling its familiar weight. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered to the silence, to her father's memory, to whatever forces governed the universe. "But if you can, thank you. For Rowan Calloway, for Mrs. Alvarez, for this room and that bowl of stew. I know I don't deserve any of it, but thank you anyway." She prepared for bed in the basin of cool water, washing away the day's dust and fear. Her nightgown was wrinkled but clean, pulled from the carpet bag with shaking hands. When she finally lay down beneath the quilt, her body went boneless with exhaustion. Through the window she could see stars, so many stars, impossible numbers of them, nothing like the handful visible through Boston's coal smoke. It was a different sky in California, a different world entirely. Tomorrow she would have to make decisions. Tomorrow she would have to figure out if she could really trust Rowan Calloway's offer, if she could survive in this harsh country so far from everything she'd known. But tonight she was warm and fed and safe. Tonight, that would have to be enough. Evelyn closed her eyes and, for the first time in weeks, slept without dreaming. CHÂ. End of part 1. Morning came with the smell of coffee and cornbread. Evelyn woke to sunlight streaming through the window, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar room. Then yesterday's events flooded back: the platform, the stranger, the offer of work. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from travel and tension. A knock sounded at her door. "Miss Whitmore? Breakfast in 15 minutes, Mrs. Alvarez called. "Thank you," Evelyn managed, her voice rough with sleep. She dressed quickly in her only other clean outfit, a simple gray dress more practical than the emerald traveling costume. Her hair she pinned severely back, studying herself in the small mirror above the washstand. The face looking back was pale, shadows under the eyes, but determined. Whatever happened today, she would face it with her spine straight and her composure intact. Downstairs, the dining room held 3 other boarders, 2 older gentlemen who nodded politely, and a young woman who barely looked up from her plate. Mrs. Alvarez served breakfast with brisk efficiency: eggs, cornbread, bacon, and strong coffee that made Evelyn's eyes water. "Eat hearty," the landlady said, refilling her cup. "Rowan will be here within the hour." The food was good, but Evelyn's stomach was tight with nerves. She forced herself to eat anyway, remembering her mother's advice: never negotiate on an empty stomach. Though her mother had been thinking of marriage proposals and social contracts, not job offers from cattle ranchers, she'd just finished when boots sounded on the front porch. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door before Rowan could knock. "Right on time," she said approvingly. "Miss Whitmore is in the dining room." He appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, looking cleaner than yesterday but no less weathered. His dark hair was damp, recently combed. He'd shaved. The gesture struck Evelyn as oddly considerate, making himself presentable for a business conversation. "Morning, Miss Whitmore," he said. "Sleep all right?" "Very well, thank you." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "And thank you for arranging the room. I'll repay you as soon as I'm able." "No need. Consider it part of your hiring bonus if you decide to take the work." He glanced at Mrs. Alvarez. "Mind if we use your parlor for a few minutes?" "Go ahead. I'll bring coffee." The parlor was small but comfortable, with 2 upholstered chairs and a settee. Rowan waited until Evelyn was seated before taking a chair himself, maintaining a respectful distance. Mrs. Alvarez delivered coffee and discreetly withdrew, though Evelyn suspected she'd remain within earshot. The thought was oddly comforting. "I want to be straight with you about what I'm offering," Rowan began without preamble. "Silver Creek Ranch is about 300 acres, running maybe 200 head of cattle. I've got 4 ranch hands who bunk in the outbuilding, and my housekeeper Maria Santos, who has a room off the kitchen. The main house has 4 bedrooms upstairs. Maria's getting on in years. She's in her 60s. and the work's getting hard for her. I need someone to help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, the usual household work." "And the bookkeeping?" Evelyn asked. "That too. I'm running a business, not just a ranch, and I've let the accounts get sloppy. Need someone who can track expenses, handle correspondence with buyers, keep the ledgers straight." He paused. "I can offer $40 a month plus room and board. That's probably more than you'd make as a governess, but the work's harder and the location's isolated." $40 was indeed generous, more than Evelyn had expected, certainly more than the fraudulent governess position had promised. "What are the living arrangements exactly?" "You'd have your own bedroom, second door on the left upstairs. Lock on the door. Maria sleeps downstairs near the kitchen, the hands are in the bunkhouse, and my room's at the far end of the upstairs hall. You'd take meals with me and Maria, same food as everyone else. Sundays off, though Maria might appreciate help with Sunday dinner if you're willing." "And the ranch hands?" Rowan's expression hardened slightly. "They're good men, been with me for years. But I'll make it crystal clear you're not to be bothered. Anyone steps out of line, they're gone that day. No second chances." The protective edge in his voice reminded Evelyn of his sister's story. He'd meant what he said yesterday. He understood the dangers women faced in isolated places. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Calloway," she said carefully. "I know nothing about ranch life. I've never cooked for more than a family dinner party. My domestic skills are adequate for Boston society, but possibly inadequate for frontier living. Maria can teach you what you need to know. She's been asking for help for 6 months, but I haven't found anyone suitable. Most women in town either have their own families or don't want to live that far from Ventura." He leaned forward slightly. "Look, Miss Whitmore, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting honest effort. Can you follow instructions, learn new skills, show up and do the work?" "Yes." "Then you're qualified enough for me." Evelyn studied him, trying to read past the weathered exterior to the man beneath. Everything about him suggested straightforward honesty, his direct gaze, his plain speech, the way he'd laid out terms without embellishment or manipulation. But she'd been fooled before by the fraudulent letter, by her father's assurances that their finances were sound, by a lifetime of polite lies dressed up as social niceties. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "You could find someone local, someone who already knows ranch work." "Because local women talk, and I value my privacy. Because you need the work bad enough that you'll take it seriously. And because—" He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because you've got education. I can see it in how you talk, how you carry yourself. Maria's smart as hell, but she never learned to read or write. I need someone who can handle correspondence, deal with buyers who might try to cheat me because they think cowboys are stupid. I need someone with a sharp mind, and you've got one." It was perhaps the most pragmatic compliment Evelyn had ever received, and somehow it meant more than a dozen flowery Boston flattery. "What about references?" she asked. "You haven't asked for any verification of my skills or character." "You got any?" "Not really. My father's dead, my mother's essentially disowned me, and I left Boston rather quickly." The admission stung, but honesty seemed important. "Then references don't matter much, do they?" Rowan said. "I'm offering you a trial period, 1 month. If it's not working for either of us at the end of 30 days, no hard feelings. I'll pay you for the time worked and arrange transport back to town. And if it does work, then we continue on. Simple as that." Nothing in Evelyn's life had ever been simple, but she found herself wanting to believe it could be. She thought of her alternatives, returning to Boston defeated, searching for work in Ventura with no references and dwindling resources, accepting some questionable position that might turn out worse than the fraudulent governess offer. "I'll need to retrieve my trunk from the station," she said. Rowan's face relaxed into something almost like a smile. "That a yes?" "That's a yes, Mr. Calloway. 1 month trial." "Rowan," he corrected, standing and extending his hand. "If we're going to work together, might as well skip the formalities." She shook his hand, feeling the calluses against her palm. "Evelyn, then." "All right, Evelyn. Let's get your trunk and head out to the ranch. It's about an hour's ride by wagon." Within 30 minutes, they'd collected her trunk from the station, settled her bill with Mrs. Alvarez despite the landlady's protests, and loaded everything into a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient draft horses. Rowan helped Evelyn onto the bench seat with the same careful courtesy he'd shown throughout, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Fair warning," he said as they rolled out of Ventura. "The road gets rough about halfway there." The town fell away behind them, buildings giving way to open country. The landscape was unlike anything Evelyn had known, rolling golden hills studded with dark oak trees, mountains purple in the distance, sky enormous and achingly blue. The air smelled of dry grass and sage, clean and sharp. For a while they rode in silence. Rowan drove with relaxed competence, letting the horses set their own pace. Evelyn gripped the edge of the bench as the wagon jolted over ruts, trying not to think about how far she was traveling from civilization with a man she'd met less than 24 hours ago. "You scared?" Rowan asked abruptly. She considered lying, then discarded the impulse. "Terrified." "Of me? Or the situation?" "Both, mostly the situation." She glanced at him. "You don't seem like someone who'd hurt me, but I've been wrong about people before." "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment. "My sister, Anna, her name is. She didn't want to trust anyone after San Francisco. Took her months before she'd even be in a room alone with our uncle. I get it. When someone betrays that trust, it breaks something." "What happened to her? If you don't mind my asking." His jaw tightened. The seamstress job was real, sort of, but the conditions, they locked the girls in at night, took their wages for room and board, worked them 16 hours a day. When Anna tried to leave, they told her she owed them money, that she couldn't leave until the debt was paid. Classic trap. His hands flexed on the reins. "I rode out there soon as I got her letter, found her half-starved, exhausted. The bastard running the place tried to tell me she'd signed a contract." "What did you do?" "Broke his nose and took my sister home." He said it flatly, without pride or shame. "Paid a lawyer to make sure he couldn't come after her legally. Then I put Anna on a train to Colorado where our aunt could take better care of her than I could." "You saved her." "I should have been there before it got that bad. Should have checked on the job offer before she left Wyoming." The guilt in his voice was old and worn, like a scar that had healed wrong. "Point is, I know what it's like to feel helpless, to be at someone else's mercy. I won't do that to you, Evelyn. I'm offering work, not ownership." Something in Evelyn's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you for telling me that." They crested a hill and Rowan pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said, pointing, "Silver Creek Ranch." In the valley below, tucked against the base of a steep hillside, a cluster of buildings nestled beside a line of trees that marked a creek bed. The main house was larger than Evelyn had expected. 2 stories, painted white, with a deep porch wrapping around the front. Behind it stood a barn, a bunkhouse, several smaller outbuildings, and a series of corrals where cattle grazed. Fences stretched across the valley floor, dividing pastures into organized sections. It looked solid, established, real. "It's bigger than I imagined," Evelyn admitted. "Started with just the original cabin. That's the core of the main house. Added on as the herd grew." There was quiet pride in his voice. "Took 8 years to build it to this." "You did this yourself?" "With help. Maria's been with me for 6 years. The hands have been here between 2 and 5 years each. It's a team effort." He released the brake and urged the horses forward. "Come on, let's get you settled." As they descended toward the ranch, Evelyn's nervousness returned. This would be her home now, at least for a month. These people would be her colleagues, possibly her friends. Everything about her life was about to change again. A woman emerged from the main house as they approached, small and round, with graying black hair pulled back in a bun and a face like weathered leather. She wiped her hands on her apron and studied the wagon with open curiosity. "Maria," Rowan called, pulling the horses to a stop. "This is Miss Evelyn Whitmore. She's going to be helping you around the house and with the accounts." Maria's dark eyes swept over Evelyn with the assessing gaze of someone accustomed to judging character quickly. "You ever done ranch work before?" "No, ma'am," Evelyn admitted, climbing down from the wagon with Rowan's assistance. "But I'm a quick learner." You look like you might blow away in a strong wind." But there was more amusement than criticism in Maria's voice. "Come inside. I'll show you where things are. Rowan, bring her trunk up to the blue room." The interior of the house was simple but well-maintained. Wood floors polished to a soft gleam, whitewashed walls, simple furniture that looked handmade but sturdy. The front door opened into a large main room with a stone fireplace, a long dining table, and several comfortable chairs. To the left, Evelyn glimpsed a kitchen. Stairs rose along the right wall to the second floor. "Kitchen's there," Maria said, pointing. "We do breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. You'll help me with all three. Laundry's on Mondays, ironing on Tuesdays. The hands eat breakfast and dinner with us, lunch they take out to wherever they're working. You know how to cook?" "Basic meals," Evelyn said. "Nothing fancy." "Fancy doesn't fill a working man's belly. Can you make biscuits?" "I've never tried." Maria sighed dramatically. "City girl. All right, I teach you. Can't have biscuits without someone who knows how to make them proper." She started up the stairs, still talking. "Your room's up here. Rowan's at the far end, mine's downstairs. You need anything in the night, you come find me. The hands are strictly off limits. They know this, but I tell you anyway. Rowan's got rules about respect, and he enforces them." The blue room was simple but clean. An iron-framed bed with a blue quilt, a dresser, a washstand, a small desk beneath the window, and a rocking chair in the corner. The window looked out over the valley, offering a view of the creek and the hills beyond. "Rowan built that desk special when I told him we might get help," Maria said, softening slightly. "He's thoughtful like that. Doesn't always show it, but he pays attention." Rowan appeared with the trunk, setting it at the foot of the bed. "This work for you?" he asked Evelyn. "It's perfect," she said honestly. The room was 3 times the size of her space at Mrs. Alvarez's, with more light and air than her bedroom in Boston had offered. "Thank you." "Settle in, then come down for lunch. Maria makes the best tortillas in the county." He paused at the door. "And Evelyn, welcome to Silver Creek." After he left, Maria lingered. "He's a good man," she said quietly. "Serious, private, works too hard, but good. You'll be safe here." "How long have you known him?" 6 years. He hired me when my husband died, when I had nowhere to go." She met Evelyn's eyes with understanding. "I know what it is to need help, so I help others when I can." "That's how it should work, no?" "Yes," Evelyn whispered. "That's how it should work." Maria patted her arm. "Unpack, wash your face, then come to the kitchen and we start teaching you how to be a ranch cook." Alone, Evelyn stood in the center of her new room and turned slowly, taking it all in. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed, everything she owned in the world. Through the window she could see cattle grazing, a rider moving among them, clouds building over the mountains. She'd come west looking for a governess position that didn't exist. Instead, she'd found this: a ranch house in California, a housekeeper willing to teach her, an employer who seemed genuinely decent. It wasn't what she'd planned. It was something entirely different. Maybe that was better. Evelyn opened her trunk and began unpacking, hanging her few dresses in the small wardrobe, arranging her toilet items on the washstand. The familiar ritual steadied her. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in silk, was her mother's silver hand mirror, the only valuable item she'd managed to keep. She set it carefully on the dresser. Downstairs she could hear Maria moving around the kitchen, the clatter of pots and the sound of humming. Outside, a man called to the cattle in Spanish. The house creaked slightly, settling into the afternoon heat. Evelyn washed her face, pinned her hair more securely, and went downstairs to begin her new life. The kitchen was warm and fragrant, filled with the smell of cooking meat and spices. Maria stood at the stove, stirring a large pot. She glanced up as Evelyn entered. "Good, you're here. Watch how I make this stew. You'll be making it yourself by next week." She pointed to a cutting board. "Start by chopping those onions. Small pieces, all the same size." Evelyn picked up the knife hesitantly. "Like this?" "Smaller. Here, I show you." Maria demonstrated with quick, efficient movements. Even pieces cook even. Big and small together, some burn, while others stay raw. Everything in cooking is about paying attention. They worked together through the afternoon, Maria explaining and demonstrating while Evelyn struggled to keep up. Chopping vegetables, seasoning meat, understanding when to add ingredients and in what order. It was more complex than Evelyn had realized. Her hands, accustomed to embroidery needles and piano keys, felt clumsy with the kitchen knife. "You'll get faster," Maria assured her. "First day, everyone is slow. By next month, you won't even think about it." At noon, The ranch hands came in for lunch, 4 men ranging from early 20s to perhaps 40, all weathered and quiet. They nodded respectfully to Evelyn, murmured ma'am, and sat at the long table without fuss. Rowan introduced them quickly. James, the foreman, Carlos and Miguel, brothers from Mexico, and Thomas, the youngest. Miss Whitmore's going to be helping Maria in handling the ranch accounts, Rowan told them. She's to be treated with respect at all times. That clear? A chorus of "Yes, boss," answered him. Lunch was simple. The stew Evelyn had helped prepare, fresh bread, and coffee. The men ate efficiently and left quickly, back to whatever work occupied their day. Evelyn noticed they all thanked Maria before leaving, and several complimented the food. "They're good boys," Maria said after they'd gone. "Work hard, don't make trouble. Carlos and Miguel send money home to their mama in Sonora. Thomas is saving to buy his own land someday. James has been with Rowan longest. He'd take a bullet for that man." "And Rowan?" Evelyn asked, helping clear the table. "What's his story?" "Parents died when he was 19. Fever took them both within a week. Left him with a sister to raise and a failing ranch to save. Most boys that age would have sold out, moved to the city. Rowan stayed. Worked himself near to death that first year," Maria said. "Then he started hiring help, building it back up. Now Silver Creek's one of the most profitable ranches in the county." "He never married?" "Too busy, maybe, or too careful." Maria shrugged. "He's had offers. Women in town have made their interest known. But Rowan keeps to himself. After what happened with Anna, I think he has trouble trusting people. Yet he'd trusted Evelyn enough to bring her here. A complete stranger." The thought was both humbling and slightly terrifying. The afternoon passed in a blur of new information. Maria showed her the pantry organization, the laundry system, the weekly cleaning schedule. There were chickens to feed, eggs to collect, bread to prepare for tomorrow. By the time dinner approached, Evelyn's head was spinning with instructions. "Don't worry," Maria said, seeing her overwhelmed expression. "I don't expect you to remember everything today. We go slow, piece by piece. Tomorrow we start with breakfast, and I teach you the biscuit secret." Dinner was larger than lunch. Roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables from the garden, and a pie made with dried apples. The hands returned, along with Rowan, all of them dusty and tired. They ate with appreciation, the conversation sparse but comfortable. Evelyn found herself watching Rowan when she thought he wouldn't notice. He was quiet at the table, listening more than talking, but when he did speak, it was with dry humor that made the hands laugh. He treated Maria with obvious respect, thanking her for the meal and asking about her sore knee. With his men, he was direct but fair, discussing the next day's work without condescension. After dinner, the hands returned to the bunkhouse. Maria shooed Evelyn toward the parlor. "You've worked enough for your first day. Go sit. I'll finish the dishes." "I should help." "Tomorrow, you help. Tonight, you rest. Go." Evelyn retreated to the parlor, sinking into one of the chairs with relief. Her feet ached, her hands were sore from unfamiliar work, and her mind buzzed with everything she'd learned. Through the doorway, she could hear Maria humming in the kitchen, the gentle splash of dishwater. Rowan appeared in the doorway. "Mind if I join you? Got some ledgers I'd like you to look at." "Of course." He settled into the other chair with a stack of leather-bound books and a sheaf of loose papers. "Fair warning, it's a mess. I've been meaning to organize it for months." Evelyn opened the top ledger and immediately understood his concern. The entries were haphazard, some in pencil, some in ink, dates out of order, calculations done in the margins. It was bookkeeping chaos. "This is," she began, "terrible. I know." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I can handle the ranch work fine, but this—" He gestured helplessly at the books. "Numbers and I don't get along." "I can fix this," Evelyn said, already mentally reorganizing the entries. "It'll take some time, but it's not impossible." "Do you have receipts for these expenses?" "Somewhere." He produced a battered box filled with crumpled papers. "Maybe in here?" Evelyn resisted the urge to sigh. "I'll need to create a proper filing system, and we should establish clear categories for expenses, feed, equipment, wages, household costs." "Whatever you think best." He leaned back, watching her flip through the ledger. "You really can make sense of this?" "My father ran a shipping business. I managed his books from the time I was 16. The memory stung less than it had yesterday. This is actually simpler than what I'm used to. Fewer variables. Your father was lucky to have you. He was lucky at many things. Unfortunately, bookkeeping wasn't enough to save him from bad investments. She set the ledger aside. But that's history now. What matters is moving forward. They worked together for an hour, Evelyn asking questions about ranch operations and expenses, while Rowan did his best to remember dates and amounts. He was more intelligent than his poor bookkeeping suggested, she realized. He could recall details about cattle sales and feed costs from months ago, could calculate profit margins in his head. He simply had no patience for writing it all down properly. "This is already better," he said, looking at the neat columns Evelyn had started in a fresh ledger. "I can actually read it. Organization isn't difficult once you establish a system. Maintaining it is the challenge." She closed the book. "I'll work on this an hour or two each day, get everything current and properly filed." "I appreciate it." He gathered the materials. "How was your first day otherwise? Maria work you too hard?" "She was very patient with me. I'm not particularly skilled at kitchen work." "You'll learn. Maria's a good teacher." He paused. "And if this doesn't work out, the arrangement, I mean, no shame in that. Not everyone's suited for ranch life." "I'll make it work," Evelyn said firmly. "I don't have the luxury of failure." Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "None of us do. That's why we're here." After he left, Evelyn sat alone in the quiet parlor. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to emerge, that impossible California sky stretching forever. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The house settled around her with creaks and whispers. She thought about Boston, about the life she'd left behind, the drawing rooms and calling cards, the careful social calculations, the constant performance of gentility. She'd lost all of that, and tonight, sitting in a ranch house with sore hands and tired feet, she found she didn't miss it as much as she'd expected. This was real, hard and simple and honest. No one here cared about her family name or social connections. They cared whether she could learn to make biscuits and balance accounts, whether she could pull her weight and earn her keep. Evelyn rose and climbed the stairs to her room. Tomorrow would come early, with chickens to feed and breakfast to prepare and 100 new skills to learn. But tomorrow was just the next step forward, and she'd take it the same way she'd taken every step since leaving Boston, with her spine straight and her determination intact. In her room, she changed into her nightgown and brushed out her hair, performing the familiar rituals that marked the day's end. The bed was comfortable, the quilt soft. Outside her window, the valley spread out in silvery moonlight, peaceful and vast. Evelyn lay down and closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of her new home settling into night. She'd survived her first day at Silver Creek Ranch. Tomorrow, she'd survive the next one. And the day after that, and the day after that. Until survival became something else entirely. Something like belonging. The first 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of exhaustion and small victories. Evelyn's hands, once soft and uncalloused, developed blisters that hardened into capability. She learned to knead bread dough until it felt like living flesh beneath her palms, to judge the heat of the oven by how quickly her hand needed to retreat, to crack eggs one-handed while stirring a pot with the other. Maria taught with patience worn smooth by years, correcting without criticism, demonstrating until Evelyn's muscle memory caught up with instruction. The biscuits remained her nemesis. They emerged from the oven either dense as stones or crumbly as sand, never achieving the perfect flaky tenderness that Maria produced effortlessly. "You're thinking too much," Maria said one morning, watching Evelyn attack the dough with grim determination. "Biscuits need a light touch. You're strangling them." "I'm following your instructions exactly." "Instructions aren't feeling. Here." Maria took Evelyn's hands and guided them through the motion, folding, not kneading, barely pressing, treating the dough like something precious. "Feel that? Gentle. Like you're putting a baby to sleep." The next batch came out better. Not perfect, but edible. Thomas the ranch hand claimed 3 of them at breakfast, which Maria declared a triumph. The ledgers proved more amenable to Evelyn's skills. She worked on them each afternoon, 2 hours in the quiet parlor, while Maria rested her aching knee and the men worked outside. The chaos slowly resolved into order, expenses categorized, income properly recorded, a clear picture emerging of Silver Creek's finances. Rowan had been more successful than he'd realized. The ranch was profitable, but opportunities were being missed through disorganization and poor record-keeping. "You're selling your cattle too cheap," Evelyn told him one evening, showing him her analysis. "Look, you sold 50 head to Morrison for $18 each in September, but the market price in San Francisco that week was $23. Rowan frowned at the numbers. "Morrison said he was giving me a fair price." "Morrison was lying, or at best taking advantage of the fact that you weren't tracking market rates." She pulled out another sheet. "I've been reading the livestock reports in the newspapers you bring from town. The prices fluctuate, but there's a pattern. Spring prices are lowest, fall prices peak, winter drops again. If you time your sales better and negotiate harder, you could increase revenue by 15 to 20%. He stared at the neat columns of figures, then at her. "How did you figure all this out in 2 weeks?" "I read. I pay attention. And I understand that information is power." She allowed herself a small smile. "My father taught me that, at least. He just didn't follow his own advice." "Well, I'm following yours." Rowan tapped the ledger. "Next sale, you're coming with me to negotiate." "I can't." "Why not? You understand the numbers better than I do. Besides, might throw Morrison off his game, having a sharp-eyed woman calling out his bullshit." Evelyn felt something warm unfold in her chest, the satisfaction of being valued for her mind, not her connections or her potential marriage prospects. "All right, I'll come." As October deepened into November, the ranch settled into its autumn routine. The cattle were brought down from the high pastures. Fences were mended against winter storms. The hands worked long days preparing for the rainy season, and Evelyn found herself falling into the rhythm of their world. She learned the names of the horses. Banjo, the temperamental stallion Rowan rode. Cricket, the gentle mare Maria had claimed. Dusty and Smoke, the reliable draft horses. She learned to read the sky for weather, to tell when the wind meant rain coming or just empty threat. She learned which chickens were the best layers and which were ornery enough to peck your hand if you weren't careful. And she learned the people. James the foreman, quiet and steady, who'd been a Union soldier and still woke sometimes with nightmares he never discussed. Carlos and Miguel, whose easy laughter filled the dinner table, who taught her Spanish words while she helped Maria cook. Thomas, barely 20, homesick for Missouri but determined to make his fortune west. And Rowan. She learned him most of all, though he remained largely a mystery. He rose before dawn and often worked until after dark. He was fair with his men but demanded excellence. He could doctor a sick cow with surprising gentleness and break a wild horse with patient persistence. He read, she discovered, kept a small shelf of books in his room, everything from agricultural manuals to Shakespeare. When he smiled, which was rare, it transformed his entire face. He never spoke of loneliness, but Evelyn saw it in the way he stood sometimes at the edge of the porch at dusk, looking out over the valley with an expression of such isolation it made her chest ache. One evening in late November, a storm rolled in with sudden violence. Rain hammered the roof and wind screamed around the corners of the house. The men had all made it back to the bunkhouse before the worst hit, but the animals were restless. Through dinner, Rowan kept glancing toward the window, tension visible in his shoulders. "The cattle?" Evelyn asked. "Should be fine. They know to shelter in the creek bed." But he didn't sound convinced. An hour later, James appeared at the kitchen door, soaked and breathing hard. "Boss, we got a problem. Part of the north fence came down. Cattle are starting to drift toward the ravine." Rowan was on his feet instantly. "How many out?" "Maybe 30 head. If they reach the ravine in this weather, get the others. We'll need all hands." He was already moving toward the door, grabbing his coat and hat. "I can help," Evelyn heard herself say. Both men turned to stare at her. "You can't ride in this," Rowan said. "I can ride. My father kept horses." It was a slight exaggeration. She'd had riding lessons as a girl, sedate walks through Boston parks. But the thought of sitting safe and dry while men risked themselves in the storm was unbearable. "Evelyn, if you need all hands, I'm a hand. Let me help." Rowan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "All right, but you stay close to me. No heroics." Maria produced a spare oilcloth coat and helped Evelyn tie her skirts up out of the way. "You're crazy, both of you," she muttered. "But bring back my boys safe." The storm was a living thing, wind and rain hitting like fists. Rowan saddled Cricket for Evelyn and Banjo for himself with quick efficiency. The other hands appeared from the bunkhouse, already mounted. "We push them back from the ravine, get them into the south pasture," Rowan shouted over the wind. "Stay together. If anyone gets in trouble, whistle loud." They rode out into chaos. Rain blurred vision to a few feet. Lightning cracked overhead, turning the world momentarily white. Cricket danced nervously beneath Evelyn, but held steady when urged forward. She focused on staying in the saddle, on following the dark shape of Rowan just ahead. The cattle were scattered across the hillside, confused and lowing in distress. In flashes of lightning, Evelyn could see the ravine, a dark slash in the earth where the land dropped away sharply. Several cows were dangerously close to the edge. "Circle around," Rowan called. "Push them east." The next hour was a blur of rain and darkness and desperate effort. Evelyn followed Rowan's lead, using Cricket to turn cattle away from the ravine, pushing them toward the others. Her clothes were soaked through within minutes. Water ran down her face, into her eyes. Her hands were numb on the reins. But slowly, painfully, they gathered the herd and drove them toward safety. Thomas's horse stumbled in the mud and nearly went down, but Carlos was there instantly, steadying them both. Miguel's sharp whistle cut through the storm, alerting them to 3 cows trying to break away. James and Rowan worked together to turn a stubborn bull that refused to leave the hillside. And Evelyn, terrified and exhilarated, discovered she could do this, could ride in a storm, could help save the cattle, could be useful in a way that mattered. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the strays were pushed into the south pasture. James and Thomas stayed to watch them, while the others returned to the barn, exhausted and dripping. In the lamplight, Rowan did a quick head count. "Everyone accounted for? Anyone hurt?" Murmurs of confirmation. Carlos had a gash on his hand from a snapped rope, but it was minor. Miguel's horse had thrown a shoe, but was otherwise sound. Rowan's gaze found Evelyn, and relief crossed his face. "You all right?" She was shaking with cold and adrenaline, but she nodded. "I'm fine." "You did good out there. Real good." He turned to address all of them. "Everyone did. Could have lost half the herd tonight. Thanks to you all, we didn't lose a single head. Get dried off, get warm. Carlos, have Maria look at that hand." The men dispersed toward the bunkhouse, talking in relieved tones now that the crisis had passed. Evelyn started to follow, but her legs wobbled. Rowan caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy, you're running on nerves now." He guided her toward the house. "Let's get you inside before you collapse." Maria met them at the door with towels and hot coffee, scolding in rapid Spanish while also pulling Evelyn close in a fierce hug. "Crazy girl. Brave, stupid, crazy girl." "I'll get her upstairs," Rowan said quietly. "She needs dry clothes and rest." He helped Evelyn up the stairs. She was shaking harder now, teeth chattering. At her door, he paused. "I'll have Maria bring up hot water for washing. Get out of those wet things." "Rowan?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Did I really help? Or did I just get in the way?" He turned back, and in the dim hallway light, his expression was impossibly gentle. "You helped. You stayed calm, followed instructions, kept your head when most people would have panicked. He stopped, seemed to search for words. "I'm grateful you were there." After he left, Evelyn peeled off her soaked clothes with numb fingers. Maria appeared with a pitcher of hot water and helped her wash and change into dry nightclothes, still muttering about foolish risks and brave hearts. She brought soup and bread, made sure Evelyn ate, then tucked the quilts around her like she was a child. "You scared me," Maria said softly. "But you made me proud too. Sleep now. Everything looks better in the morning." But Evelyn lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm slowly exhaust itself. Her body ached, her hands were blistered in new places, and she was more tired than she'd ever been. But something had shifted tonight. She'd proven something to herself, and maybe to Rowan too. She belonged here, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd earned her place. Morning brought brilliant sunshine and a world washed clean. Evelyn woke late, her muscles screaming protest when she tried to move. She dressed slowly and limped downstairs to find Maria alone in the kitchen. "The men?" Evelyn asked. "Out fixing the fence that came down. Rowan said to let you sleep." Maria pushed a plate of eggs and biscuits across the table. "Eat. You earned rest, but you also need food." The biscuits were perfect, flaky and tender. Evelyn ate 3 without thinking, suddenly ravenous. Outside, she could hear hammering and men's voices raised in work songs. She spent the morning helping Maria with laundry, her hands clumsy and sore. Around noon, Rowan returned to the house, his shirt marked with mud and sweat. He stopped when he saw Evelyn folding sheets. "You should be resting," he said. "I've rested enough. Work doesn't stop because I'm sore." "No, but you could take it easy for one day." He poured himself coffee, studying her with that penetrating gaze. "You're tougher than you look, Evelyn Whitmore." "I've had to be." "Still, last night was dangerous. I shouldn't have let you come." "You couldn't have stopped me." She met his eyes. "And I'm glad I was there. I'm glad I could help." He opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to wrestle with something. Finally he said, "My sister Anna, after San Francisco, she was terrified of everything. Wouldn't go outside alone, couldn't sleep without a lamp burning. She felt helpless, and it ate at her." He set down his cup. "Watching you last night, riding into that storm without hesitation, you reminded me that fear doesn't have to win, that people can be stronger than what's been done to them." The vulnerability in his voice made Evelyn's throat tight. "Your sister, is she doing better now?" "Last letter said she's engaged, to a good man, our aunt says, someone patient." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She's finding her way back to herself. It just takes time." "And you?" Evelyn asked softly. "Are you finding your way to anything?" He looked startled, then thoughtful. "I don't know. Mostly I just work. Keep the ranch running, keep the men paid, keep moving forward. That's enough most days." "Is it?" The question hung between them, weighted with meanings neither was quite ready to name. Rowan's dark eyes searched her face, and Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the laundry steam. "I should get back to the fence," he said finally, but he didn't move. "Yes," Evelyn agreed, not looking away. Maria's voice cut through the moment like scissors through thread. "Rowan Calloway, stop bothering my helper and go back to work. And Evelyn, these sheets won't fold themselves." Rowan retreated with something that might have been relief or regret. Evelyn couldn't tell which. She turned back to the laundry, but her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric. The month anniversary of her arrival came and went without discussion. The trial period Rowan had mentioned seemed forgotten by both of them. Evelyn's role at the ranch had solidified into permanence through sheer routine. She managed the household alongside Maria, kept the books with precision, and had even begun accompanying Rowan to town for supply runs and business meetings. The first time she negotiated a cattle sale, the buyer had tried to patronize her. Rowan had simply leaned against the corral fence and said, "Miss Whitmore handles our numbers. Whatever price you agree to with her, that's what we'll take." She'd gotten them $21 a head. Morrison had sputtered about market conditions and transportation costs, but Evelyn had countered every argument with facts pulled from her research. When they'd driven away with the contract signed, Rowan had laughed, actually laughed, deep and genuine. "You enjoyed that," he'd said, "immensely." She'd grinned back, feeling victorious and alive. December brought the first real rains, not the violent storms of autumn, but steady, soaking weather that turned the valley green and the roads to mud. The ranch work shifted to indoor projects, mending tack, organizing tools, planning for spring. The men spent more time in the main house, and the dinner table grew louder with stories and laughter. Evelyn found herself listening to their tales with fascination, accounts of trail drives and wild horses, close calls with rattlesnakes and stubborn cattle. Thomas told stories about Missouri that made them all laugh. Miguel could sing in a voice that made Maria weep with nostalgia for Mexico. James, when coaxed, would recite poetry he'd memorized during the war, and Rowan gradually began to relax in Evelyn's presence. She caught him watching her sometimes, when she was working on the ledgers with her tongue between her teeth in concentration, or when she laughed at one of Carlos's jokes. The looks were brief, quickly shuttered, but they sent warmth spreading through her chest. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one rainy afternoon while she sat in the parlor, supposedly working on correspondence, but actually watching him repair a bridle with patient, careful hands. The way he frowned in concentration, the strength in his forearms, the quiet competence in everything he did. This wasn't the calculated romantic interest her mother had tried to cultivate in Boston's eligible bachelors. This was something raw and real, built on respect and shared purpose, and the simple fact that she liked who she was when she was near him. It terrified her. That evening, as the rain drummed overhead and the men played cards in the bunkhouse, Evelyn found herself alone with Rowan in the parlor. He'd built up the fire against the damp chill and sat reading while she pretended to work on the accounts. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, not looking up from his book. "Just thinking." "About?" She should have deflected, changed the subject, maintained the careful distance that kept them safely in employer and employee territory. Instead, she said, "About how strange it is that 6 weeks ago I was sitting on a train platform with nowhere to go, and now I'm here." He closed his book, giving her his full attention. "You regret coming?" "No, that's what's strange. I should regret it, leaving everything familiar, working harder than I ever have, living in the middle of nowhere with people I barely knew." She met his eyes. "But I don't regret any of it." "Good." The word was quiet but weighted. "Because I don't regret bringing you here." The fire crackled. Outside, the rain intensified. They sat in the warm lamplight, and Evelyn felt the air between them thicken with unspoken things. "Rowan?" "Evelyn." They'd spoken simultaneously. Both stopped, both smiled uncertainly. "You first," Rowan said. She took a breath, gathering courage. "I need to know, is this still just a business arrangement, or has it become something else?" His expression shifted. Surprise, then something deeper. "What do you want it to be?" I asked first. "Fair enough." He stood, crossed to the window, stood looking out at the rain-dark valley. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "I hired you because you needed work and I needed help. That's how it started. But somewhere along the way, it became—" He turned to face her. "You're not just my bookkeeper, Evelyn. You're the person I look for first when I come in from the pastures. You're who I think about when I'm riding fence lines. You're the reason I started caring whether the house is warm, whether there's good food on the table, whether the day has anything in it besides work." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. "Rowan?" "Let me finish." He moved closer, not quite touching her. "I know this isn't what you planned. Hell, it isn't what I planned either. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just someone who works here. I can't pretend I don't care about you." The confession hung in the air between them, brave and vulnerable. Evelyn stood, closing the distance he'd left, and took his hands in hers. They were warm and calloused and steady. "I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I've been trying not to, because it seems impossible and reckless and completely impractical. But I am, anyway." His breath caught. "Evelyn, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 6 weeks. I know all the reasons this is foolish." She tightened her grip on his hands. "But I also know that you're the best man I've ever met. That when I'm with you, I feel like I can be exactly who I am. That this ranch feels more like home than Boston ever did." "You're sure?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I'm not a man who does things halfway. If you're mine completely." "I'm sure." And she was. Surer than she'd been about anything since leaving Boston. "Are you?" Instead of answering with words, Rowan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, then deepened into certainty. Evelyn melted into him, her arms sliding around his neck, feeling the solid strength of him against her. The kiss tasted like possibility and promise, like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sure," he whispered. "I've been sure since you rode out in that storm without hesitation. Maybe even before that." They stood wrapped in each other's arms while the fire burned low and the rain sang against the windows. Outside, the valley stretched dark and vast, but inside this circle of warmth and light, everything felt right. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked eventually. "Now?" Rowan pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes dark and intent. Now I court you properly. Take you to dances in town, introduce you as my intended, do all the things decent men do when they're serious about a woman. Your intended? Unless you object. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. I'm not a patient man when I know what I want, Evelyn, and I want you, for always. That's rather presumptuous, she said, but couldn't keep the joy from her voice. Is it? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're not thinking about forever, too. She couldn't, because she was thinking about it, about years of working beside him, about children with his dark eyes and her stubborn chin, about growing old together in this valley they both loved. You're not wrong, she admitted, but I still expect proper courting. Yes, ma'am. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. Starting tomorrow, tonight, I just want to hold you and know this is real. They settled onto the settee, Evelyn tucked against Rowan's side, his arms secure around her shoulders. The fire burned down to embers. The rain gentled to a whisper. And in the quiet ranch house, surrounded by the life they were building together, two people who'd been lost found exactly where they belonged. In each other's arms, in this wild, beautiful country, in a future neither had planned but both now chose with open eyes and willing hearts. Maria knew before they said anything. The next morning, she took one look at them across the breakfast table. The way Rowan's hand lingered on Evelyn's shoulder, the flush in Evelyn's cheeks, the quiet joy radiating from both of them, and smiled knowingly into her coffee. About time, was all she said, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. The ranch hands figured it out over the following days through 100 small tells. The way Rowan now sat beside Evelyn at dinner instead of at the head of the table. How she'd started calling him by his first name in front of everyone instead of the formal Mr. Calloway she'd used those first weeks. The morning Thomas caught them kissing behind the barn and retreated so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. By week's end, it was simply accepted. Rowan and Evelyn were courting, and the household adjusted around this new reality with easy grace. Carlos teased Rowan mercilessly about being domesticated. Miguel started singing romantic ballads in Spanish during dinner, which made Maria throw dish towels at him. James just nodded approvingly and told Evelyn she was good for the boss. He smiles now, the foreman said one afternoon while Evelyn helped him inventory supplies. Used to be he'd go weeks without cracking a smile. Now he does it 3-4 times a day. That's your doing. Maybe he just has more to smile about, Evelyn suggested. Yeah, you. James's weathered face softened. I'm glad you came here, Miss Evelyn. Place feels more like a home now, less like just a work camp. The first time Rowan took her to town as his intended, Ventura buzzed with speculation. They attended the Saturday evening social at the community hall, a simple affair with fiddle music and dancing, tables laden with potluck dishes, children running wild while adults gossiped in corners. Rowan held Evelyn's hand walking in, a public declaration that raised eyebrows and launched whispered conversations. Mrs. Alvarez descended on them immediately, pulling Evelyn into a fierce embrace. I knew it. The moment he brought you to my door, I told my sister. I said, this one is different. He looks at her different. You're embarrassing them, Rosa, her sister chided, but she was smiling too. Other women approached with varying degrees of warmth. Some were genuinely kind, welcoming Evelyn into their community. Others assessed her with sharp eyes, measuring her against whatever expectations they held. A few looked at Rowan with barely concealed disappointment, women who'd harbored hopes of catching the eligible rancher themselves. Don't mind Sarah Mitchell, Mrs. Alvarez whispered, nodding toward a blonde woman glaring from across the room. She's been throwing herself at Rowan for 2 years. He never gave her the time of day. Maybe I should talk to her, Evelyn suggested. Smooth things over. Let her sulk. She'll get over it or she won't. Either way, not your problem. But Evelyn felt the weight of being the outsider, the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere and claimed the most eligible bachelor in the county. She'd experienced similar dynamics in Boston society, though there the weapons had been cutting remarks delivered in drawing rooms rather than cold shoulders at country dances. Rowan seemed oblivious to the undercurrents. He introduced Evelyn proudly, his hand steady at the small of her back. When the music started, he led her onto the floor for a waltz, and suddenly nothing else mattered. He danced well for a rancher, moving with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. "You're stiff," he murmured, pulling her fractionally closer. "Relax. Half these people are just nosy, not malicious. And the other half? Will come around once they know you." He spun her gently. "Give it time. Small towns are suspicious of newcomers, but they're loyal once you prove yourself." "How do I prove myself?" "Just be who you are. That's enough." His faith in her was humbling and terrifying in equal measure. Evelyn wanted desperately to be worthy of it, to belong in this community the way she was beginning to belong at the ranch. The evening improved as it progressed. She found herself in conversation with several ranch wives who were curious about Boston and eager to share local gossip. Mrs. Chen, who ran the general store, cornered her to discuss the possibility of Evelyn helping with bookkeeping. Apparently word had spread about her skill with numbers. Two mothers asked if she might tutor their children in reading, as the nearest school was 15 miles away. "See," Rowan said on the drive home, the wagon rattling over dark roads under brilliant stars, "you're already becoming part of things." "They think I'm strange," Evelyn said. "An educated woman from back east, living unmarried on a ranch with a man. Recording properly. Anyone who has a problem with the arrangement can take it up with me." His jaw set stubbornly. "Besides, we won't be unmarried much longer." Evelyn's heart skipped. "Is that a proposal, Rowan Calloway?" "Not yet. When I propose, you'll know it." He glanced at her, eyes warm in the darkness. "But I'm giving you fair warning. I'm not planning to court you for years. Few months, maybe. Long enough to do it right, but not so long you might change your mind." "I won't change my mind." "Good. Neither will I." They rode in comfortable silence, shoulders touching as the wagon swayed. Above them, the Milky Way splashed across the sky like spilled cream. Evelyn thought about the train platform where this had all begun, about the desperation and fear that had consumed her that day. If someone had told her then that 2 months later she'd be riding home to a ranch with a man she loved, planning a future in California, she'd have thought them insane. Yet here she was, and she'd never been happier. December brought unexpected challenges. A letter arrived from Boston, forwarded through Mrs. Alvarez from the address Evelyn had left with the postal service. Her mother's sister had written in cramped, disapproving script. "Your mother is distressed by your continued silence. She fears you've come to harm in that savage western territory. I have written to inform her you are employed as a servant on some cattle ranch, which has not improved her spirits. She asks that you return home immediately and accept Mr. Thornton's renewed offer of marriage. He is willing to overlook your rash behavior and reduce circumstances. This is more generosity than you deserve. Do not squander it through pride." Evelyn read the letter twice, feeling sick. Mr. Thornton was 63, had buried 2 wives already, and smelled perpetually of mothballs and desperation. Her mother had tried to arrange the match before Evelyn left Boston. She'd refused, choosing uncertainty over that particular prison. "Bad news?" Rowan asked, finding her on the porch where she'd retreated after reading. She handed him the letter without comment. He read it, his expression darkening with each line. "This Mr. Thornton," he said carefully. "You were supposed to marry him?" "My mother wanted me to. I didn't." Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself against the December chill. "He's old enough to be my grandfather and has the personality of a particularly bitter lemon. But he has money, and I had none, so in her eyes it was a perfect match. And she thinks you should go back to Boston for this. Apparently my life here is so unacceptable that marrying a man I despise would be preferable." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Funny, isn't it? She couldn't be bothered to help when I needed her, but now she's distressed by my silence." Rowan folded the letter and handed it back. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. I'm not going back. I'm not marrying Mr. Thornton or anyone else my mother approves of." She met his eyes. "My life is here now. She'll have to accept that." "She might not." "I know." The thought carried a deeper grief than Evelyn wanted to acknowledge. She'd already lost so much: her father, her home, the life she'd planned. Now she might be losing her mother too, severing the last tie to her old existence. "But I can't live the life she wants just to keep her comfortable. I tried that already, and it nearly destroyed me." Rowan pulled her into his arms, and Evelyn let herself sink into his warmth. "Write to her if you want," he said quietly. "Tell her you're safe, you're happy, you're building a good life. Maybe she'll come around eventually. And if she doesn't, then you'll have something she never gave you, a family that chooses you because of who you are, not because of what they think you should be." Evelyn wrote the letter that night, carefully and honestly. She told her mother about the ranch, about Maria and the men, about learning to keep books and make biscuits and ride in storms. She told her about Rowan, his kindness, his integrity, how he'd saved her when she'd had nowhere else to turn. She didn't mention love, knowing her mother would dismiss it as foolish romance, but she made it clear she wasn't coming back. "I am building a life here that has meaning and purpose," she wrote in closing. "I hope you can find it in your heart to be happy for me, even if this isn't the life you would have chosen. I remain your loving daughter, Evelyn." She posted the letter on the next trip to town, knowing it might be the last communication she'd have with her mother. The grief was sharp but bearable. She was choosing her future over her past, and that required letting some things go. Christmas approached with quiet anticipation. Maria threw herself into preparations, teaching Evelyn to make tamales and buñuelos, filling the house with spices and warmth. The men cut a pine tree from the hills and set it up in the parlor. Together they strung popcorn and cranberries, carved wooden ornaments, transformed the simple room into something magical. On Christmas Eve they held a feast. Maria outdid herself with turkey and ham, mashed potatoes and sweet potatoes, 3 kinds of pie, and her special cinnamon cookies. The ranch hands came up from the bunkhouse in their cleanest clothes, and everyone crowded around the big table, passing dishes and telling stories. "To Silver Creek," James raised his glass in a toast, "and to the people who make it home." "To family," Maria added, her eyes suspiciously bright. "To second chances," Rowan said quietly, looking at Evelyn. She felt tears prick her own eyes. A year ago, she'd spent Christmas in Boston's fading grandeur, pretending everything was fine while her father's health failed and their finances crumbled. This year, she sat surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her, in a house filled with laughter and warmth, beside a man who looked at her like she was his entire world. After dinner, Thomas produced a harmonica and played carols while they sang, some beautifully, some badly, all of them with enthusiasm. Miguel told the story of his grandmother's Christmas traditions in Mexico. James recited a poem about winter that made Maria cry. Carlos demonstrated a card trick that fooled everyone except Evelyn, who'd watched carefully and caught the sleight of hand. As midnight approached, people began drifting toward bed. The hands headed back to the bunkhouse, calling goodnight and thanks. Maria hugged everyone fiercely before retreating to her room. Soon only Rowan and Evelyn remained, sitting by the dying fire with the decorated tree glowing in the corner. "Happy Christmas," Rowan said softly. "Happy Christmas." Evelyn leaned against his shoulder. This was perfect. Almost perfect. He shifted, reaching into his pocket. "I was going to wait until spring, do this properly with flowers and a fancy dinner in town, but I can't wait anymore." He slid off the settee onto one knee, and Evelyn's breath caught. From his pocket, he pulled a simple gold ring set with a small but flawless sapphire. "Evelyn Whitmore, I'm not good with pretty words. I'm just a rancher who got lucky the day you sat down on that train platform. But I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. You've made this house a home, made my life mean something beyond just work and survival. You've made me want things I never let myself dream about. A wife, children, a future." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "Will you marry me? Will you stay here and build this life with me?" Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. She slid down beside him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, with all the pent-up emotion of months of wanting. When they broke apart, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "Only valuable thing my mother left me. I've been carrying it around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment." This was the perfect moment. Evelyn admired how the sapphire caught the firelight. "How did you know my size?" "Ask Maria to check one of your other rings while you were sleeping." He grinned, looking younger and lighter than she'd ever seen him. "She's been dying to tell you, but I swore her to secrecy." "She knew? This whole time?" Since early December. Nearly killed her to keep quiet about it. Evelyn laughed through her tears. We should tell her first thing in the morning. Let her have the satisfaction of saying she knew all along. She'll probably say she knew before I did. Rowan pulled Evelyn close again, settling them both against the settee. But first, let me just hold you for a while. My fiancé. That's going to take some getting used to. Good getting used to, I hope. The best kind. They sat wrapped in each other until the fire burned to ash and the cold crept in. Finally, reluctantly, they separated to their own rooms. Propriety still mattered, even engaged. But Evelyn lay awake for hours, looking at the ring on her finger, marveling at the path that had led her here. Morning brought Maria's triumphant crowing. I knew it! I told Rosa Alvarez last week. I said, watch, he'll propose before the new year. Did I not say this, Evelyn? You did, Evelyn confirmed, laughing. You're very wise, Maria. Of course I'm wise. I am old. Wisdom comes with wrinkles. She pulled Evelyn into a crushing hug. You will be so happy, mija. He is a good man, and you are good for him. Together you will build something beautiful. The hands offered enthusiastic congratulations at breakfast. Thomas was already planning the bachelor party he'd throw for Rowan. Carlos and Miguel argued about what songs should be played at the wedding. James simply shook Rowan's hand and told him he'd made the right choice, which from the taciturn foreman meant everything. Planning the wedding became a project that carried them through the dark weeks of January. They decided on a spring ceremony, late April, when the hills would be green and wildflowers would bloom across the valley. Small and simple, just close friends and the ranch family, followed by a celebration at the house. But first came the work of expanding the ranch to accommodate a growing family. Rowan wanted to add rooms to the house, modernize the kitchen, build a proper office where Evelyn could manage the books. Together they drew plans and made lists, arguing cheerfully about practicalities and dreaming about the future. I want at least 3 children, Rowan announced one evening, sprawled across the settee with his head in Evelyn's lap. 3? That's very specific. Well, I had a sister, so I know siblings are important, but not too many. I want to be able to give each kid proper attention. He looked up at her hopefully. What do you think? I think 3 sounds perfect. She ran her fingers through his dark hair. 2 boys and a girl, maybe. Or 2 girls and a boy. As long as they're healthy and loved. They'll be both. We'll make sure of it. February brought storms and hard work. A section of the barn roof collapsed under heavy rain, requiring immediate repair. 2 cows came down with fever and needed careful nursing. The account showed a shortfall from winter expenses, forcing difficult decisions about which improvements to delay. Through it all, Evelyn and Rowan worked as a team. She managed the finances with careful precision, finding savings where possible without cutting necessary costs. He handled the physical demands of the ranch with his usual competence, but now he came to her for advice on business decisions, valuing her perspective. What do you think about Morrison's offer for the spring calves? He asked one night, showing her a letter. Evelyn read it carefully, then pulled out her market research. He's low-balling again. The San Francisco prices are 15% higher. If we can arrange our own transport, we'd make significantly more selling directly. Transport's expensive, though. Not as expensive as losing 15% on every head. She showed him her calculations. Even accounting for transport and lodging in the city, we'd clear an extra $200. You want to take a cattle drive to San Francisco? He looked intrigued. I want us to maximize profit. If that means a cattle drive, then yes. She smiled at his expression. What? You think I can't handle it? I think you can handle anything you set your mind to. I'm just impressed at how much you've changed from that scared woman on the train platform. I haven't changed. I just found a place where I could be myself. She took his hand. You helped me find that. The decision was made. In early March, they would drive 40 head of spring calves to San Francisco, sell them at market prices, and use the profit to fund the house expansion. It was ambitious and slightly risky, but Rowan trusted Evelyn's numbers, and she trusted his ability to manage the logistics. The night before they left, Maria pulled Evelyn aside. You take care on this trip, yes? San Francisco is not like Ventura. It's a big city, lots of people, some of them not so nice. We'll be careful. Rowan knows what he's doing. I know he knows, but you are still learning. Maria's weathered hand cupped Evelyn's cheek. You have become like a daughter to me, mija. So I worry. It is what mothers do. The word struck deeper than Maria probably intended. Evelyn's own mother had never worried about her like this, never shown this kind of protective care. Thank you, Maria, for everything. For teaching me, accepting me, loving me when I had no one. Bah, you make me cry. But Maria's eyes were indeed wet. Go, be safe. Come back to me so we can plan this wedding properly. The cattle drive took 5 days of hard travel. They moved the herd north along coastal roads, camping rough at night, pushing through cold fog and occasional rain. Rowan hired 2 additional drovers for the trip, experienced men who knew the route. Evelyn rode alongside them, helping manage the cattle, proving herself capable despite her relative inexperience. San Francisco rose before them like a vision from another world. Massive buildings, crowded streets, noise and chaos that made Ventura seem like a sleepy village. Evelyn felt overwhelmed by the press of humanity, the smell of coal smoke and unwashed bodies, the constant din of commerce. But she also felt exhilarated. This was a test. Could she negotiate in this environment? Could she hold her own among city businessmen who tried to dismiss her as a simple ranch wife? The stockyards were brutal and businesslike. Buyers moved through the pens, assessing cattle with cold calculation. Rowan handled the physical side, presenting the animals, demonstrating their health and quality. Evelyn handled the negotiation, meeting each lowball offer with facts and calm insistence on fair market value. 3 buyers dismissed her outright, refusing to negotiate with a woman. She walked away from all 3 without hesitation. The 4th, an older man named Patterson, was initially skeptical but listened to her arguments. You've done your research, he admitted after she'd countered his 3rd offer with updated market reports. Most ranchers just take what I offer. Most ranchers don't have someone tracking prices across 6 markets and calculating transport costs to the penny, Evelyn replied. I know what our cattle are worth, Mr. Patterson. The question is whether you want to buy them at a fair price or watch us sell to someone else. He smiled slowly. $22 a head. Final offer. Evelyn had been hoping for 21. She kept her expression neutral. Done. We'll need the payment in bank draft, not cash. Smart girl. He shook her hand firmly. Your husband's lucky to have you. Fiancé, she corrected. And I'm the lucky one. They completed the sale, collected the bank draft, and secured lodging for the night at a modest hotel. Over dinner in the hotel restaurant, Rowan raised his glass to Evelyn. To my brilliant business partner, he said, you just made us enough money to build those extra rooms and still have plenty left over. We made it together, she corrected. You raised the cattle, I sold them. Partnership. Partnership, he agreed, and the word felt like a promise of everything their marriage would be. The return journey felt lighter despite the exhaustion. They'd proven themselves, proven their teamwork, their capability, their potential to build something lasting. As Silver Creek Ranch came into view, the familiar buildings nestled in the green valley, Evelyn felt a surge of fierce love for this place. Home. She was coming home. Maria met them at the door with hot coffee and 100 questions. The hands crowded around to hear about San Francisco, about the sale, about the city's wonders and dangers. That night they celebrated with a feast, and Evelyn found herself telling stories about negotiating with Patterson, making everyone laugh with her imitation of his skeptical expression. You should have seen her, Rowan told the group, pride obvious in his voice. This man tried to tell her that cattle prices had dropped, and she pulled out a newspaper and showed him he was lying, nearly choked on his own tobacco. I was polite about it, Evelyn protested. You were terrifying. I loved every second. March flowed into April with preparations for the wedding consuming every spare moment. Evelyn sewed her own dress with Maria's help. Simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, practical enough to wear again for special occasions. Mrs. Alvarez organized the women of Ventura to prepare food for the celebration. James and the hands built a bower of fresh-cut pine and spring flowers near the creek for the ceremony. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Colorado. Anna, Rowan's sister, was coming for the ceremony. She'd bring their aunt, and they'd stay a week to help however needed. Rowan's joy at the news was profound. I haven't seen Anna in over a year. he told Evelyn. "I was afraid she might not feel strong enough to travel. She wants to be here for you. For us." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I can't wait to meet her, to thank her." "Thank her? If she hadn't gone through what she did, you might not have been at that train station the day I needed you most. Everything connects, Rowan. All the pain, all the struggle. It led us both here." Anna arrived on a Thursday, stepping off the train with a woman who had to be their aunt. Both had Rowan's dark eyes and strong features, but where Rowan was reserved, Anna was effervescent. She threw herself into her brother's arms with a squeal of delight, then turned to Evelyn with tears in her eyes. "You're her. You're the reason he smiles in his letters." Anna grabbed Evelyn's hands. "Thank you. Thank you for loving him. He deserves all the happiness in the world." "So do you," Evelyn said gently, seeing shadows beneath Anna's joy, the scars that never fully healed. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations and getting to know Rowan's family. Anna and Evelyn became instant allies, sitting up late talking about everything and nothing. The younger woman had a wicked sense of humor and a hard-won wisdom that reminded Evelyn of her own journey. "When Rowan wrote about you, I was so happy," Anna confided one night. "After what happened to me, I was afraid he'd never trust anyone enough to fall in love, but you're perfect for him. Strong and smart and kind." "I'm not perfect," Evelyn said. "I'm just trying my best." "That's all any of us can do," Anna smiled. "And sometimes trying is enough." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the valley dressed in spring glory. Wild lupine and California poppies painted the hills purple and gold. The creek ran full and musical with snowmelt from the mountains. Every detail was exactly as they'd planned, exactly right. Evelyn dressed in her simple gown, Maria fussing over every fold while Anna wove wildflowers into her hair. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not because she'd changed so much, but because she finally looked like herself. Not the polished Boston lady she'd been trained to be, but the strong, capable woman she'd become. The ceremony was held at sunset, golden light streaming across the valley. Rowan stood beneath the bower in his best suit, freshly shaved and looking nervous and wonderful. James stood as his best man. Maria and Anna flanked Evelyn as she walked toward her future. No father to give her away because she was giving herself freely, choosing this with open eyes and full heart. The minister spoke simply about love and partnership, about two people building a life together in faith and trust. When it came time for vows, Rowan's voice was steady. "Evelyn, I promise to love you, honor you, and walk beside you through whatever comes. I promise to value your mind as much as your heart, to listen when you speak, to hold you when you hurt. I promise to build this life with you, not just for you. You're my partner in everything, and I'll treat you as such every day we're given." Evelyn's voice shook but didn't break. "Rowan, I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to stand by you in hardship and celebrate with you in joy. I promise to be honest, to be brave, to be worthy of the faith you've placed in me. You saved me when I was lost, and I'll spend my life making sure you never regret that kindness." "I could never regret you," he whispered. And then they were kissing, and everyone was cheering, and the valley rang with celebration. The party lasted until long past midnight. There was food and music, dancing and laughter, toasts that made them cry, and stories that made them laugh. Every person there had played a role in bringing them to this moment, and the gratitude Evelyn felt was overwhelming. As the stars wheeled overhead and the fire burned low, Rowan pulled his wife, into his arms for one last dance. "Happy?" he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Evelyn answered truthfully. And in that moment, beneath the vast California sky, surrounded by the people who'd become their family, beginning the next chapter of a life they'd build together, happiness seemed like too small a word for the fullness of her heart. Their wedding night was spent in the house they'd already shared for months. But everything felt different now. The same bedroom Evelyn had occupied since November became theirs together, transformed not by decoration, but by permission. The final barrier of propriety dissolved into the intimacy of marriage. Rowan carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, and they fell into bed wrapped in each other, exhausted and elated, and finally, completely together. Morning came with Maria's gentle knock and coffee left outside their door, a tactful gesture that made Evelyn smile. They emerged eventually to find Anna and their aunt preparing breakfast, while Maria directed operations from her chair, claiming her knee needed rest after yesterday's dancing. "About time you two showed up," Anna teased. "We were beginning to think you'd sleep until noon." "It's barely 8, Rowan protested, but he was grinning, his arms secure around Evelyn's waist. The week following the wedding passed in a golden haze. Anna and Aunt Margaret stayed on, helping with the daily work while sharing stories of Rowan's childhood that made him groan and Evelyn laugh. She learned he'd been a serious child, always taking responsibility, always worrying about everyone else. She learned he'd taught himself to read from his mother's Bible and a farmer's almanac. She learned he'd once tried to rescue a baby rabbit from a hawk and ended up with talon scars on his forearm he still carried. "He's always been that way," Anna said one afternoon while they worked together in the garden. "Sees something that needs saving and can't help himself. That's why what happened to me tore him apart so badly. He thought he should have protected me better." "It wasn't his fault," Evelyn said quietly. "I know that. He knows it too, intellectually. But knowing and feeling are different things." Anna pulled a weed with perhaps more force than necessary. "I'm glad he found you, Evelyn. You give him something to build toward instead of just things to protect. That's what he needs." When Anna and Aunt Margaret finally departed, tearful promises to visit soon exchanged all around, the ranch felt emptier. But it also felt more like Evelyn and Rowan's own, their marriage, their home, their life to shape as they chose. May brought the hard work of spring expansion. The additions to the house took shape slowly. A proper office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves for the ranch records, an expanded kitchen with a modern cast-iron stove that made Maria weep with joy, 2 additional bedrooms upstairs for the children they planned. Rowan worked alongside the hired carpenters, and Evelyn managed both the household and the construction budget with careful attention. One evening, exhausted and covered in sawdust, Rowan flopped down beside Evelyn on the front porch where she sat reviewing invoices. "Tell me again why we're doing this during the busiest season of the year?" he groaned. "Because you're impatient and wanted it done before winter." She kissed his dusty cheek. "Also because you're hoping I'll be pregnant by fall and you want the nursery ready." He had the grace to look sheepish. "Am I that transparent?" "Completely." She set aside her papers and took his hand. "And for the record, I hope the same thing." His expression softened into something tender and vulnerable. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She laced their fingers together. "I want to see you teach our son to ride. I want to watch our daughter learn to make biscuits with Maria. I want this house full of noise and chaos and love." "We'll make it happen," he promised. "All of it." Summer arrived with blazing heat and long working days. The cattle thrived in the green pastures. The accounts showed healthy profits from the San Francisco sale and subsequent business decisions. Evelyn's reputation as a sharp negotiator had spread, and other ranchers began asking her advice on market timing and business contracts, requests she accepted for modest fees that added to their growing savings. "You could start a consulting business," Rowan suggested one night. "Help other ranchers with their bookkeeping and negotiations." "I have enough to do managing our ranch," Evelyn said. But the idea intrigued her. She discovered she enjoyed the challenge of business, the satisfaction of finding solutions to complex problems. Maybe someday, when their family was established and the ranch ran smoothly, she could expand into advising others. In July, morning sickness announced what they'd been hoping for. Evelyn was pregnant, due in late winter or early spring. Maria immediately became insufferable with advice and dietary restrictions. Anna sent a letter full of excited congratulations and detailed instructions for managing pregnancy symptoms. Even the ranch hands became protective, insisting Evelyn avoid heavy lifting and dangerous work. "I'm pregnant, not incapacitated," she protested when Thomas tried to carry a basket of laundry for her. "Boss's orders, ma'am. We're to make sure you don't overdo it." Rowan, when confronted, refused to apologize. "You're carrying my child. Let people help you." "I've been doing my own work for months, and now you're doing work for 2. There's a difference." He pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "Please, Evelyn. Let me take care of you. Both of you." The tenderness in his voice melted her resistance. "Fine. But I'm not becoming some delicate flower who sits around doing needlepoint all day. Wouldn't dream of it. You'd be terrible at needlepoint anyway." She smacked his arm, but she was laughing. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer into fall. Evelyn's body changed in ways both wonderful and strange. The gradual swell of her belly, the first fluttering movements that made her gasp, the way Rowan's eyes softened every time he looked at her. She worked until she couldn't button her regular clothes, then worked in the loose dresses Maria sewed for her. She managed the books until numbers started swimming on the page from fatigue. Then she trained Thomas to help with basic bookkeeping so the work wouldn't fall behind. In October, a letter arrived that Evelyn almost didn't open. The handwriting was her mother's, the first communication since she'd sent news of her engagement months ago. With shaking hands, she broke the seal. "My dear Evelyn," it began, and her mother's voice seemed to echo through the formal script. "Your Aunt Catherine has informed me that you are expecting a child. While I cannot claim to approve of the circumstances that led to your current situation, I find I cannot remain estranged from my only daughter, particularly when she is about to become a mother herself. I have been unkind, and I regret it. If you would permit me, I would like to visit in the spring to meet your husband and my grandchild. I understand if you prefer I stay away, but I hope you might find it in your heart to forgive a foolish old woman who let pride prevent her from supporting her daughter when she needed it most." Evelyn read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Rowan found her in the office, clutching the paper and crying. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "My mother wants to visit," Evelyn managed. She apologized, Rowan. She actually apologized. Relief washed over his face. "That's good, isn't it?" "I don't know, maybe. I'm terrified she'll come here and disapprove of everything. The ranch, our life, you." Then she disapproves. "We don't need her blessing, Evelyn. We have each other. We have this life we've built. Her opinion doesn't change any of that." He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "But if you want a relationship with your mother, if you want our child to know their grandmother, then we'll make it work. We'll invite her here and show her exactly who we are. If she can accept that, wonderful. If not, we'll survive." "When did you become so wise?" "When I married someone who makes me want to be better." He kissed her forehead. "Write to her. Invite her for spring. We'll face it together, whatever happens." Winter settled over the valley with unusual gentleness that year. The rains came steady but not violent, the cold sharp but not brutal. The ranch work slowed to its winter pace. Maintenance and planning, training young horses, mending equipment. Evelyn grew large and uncomfortable, her back aching, her ankles swelling, her sleep disrupted by the baby's vigorous movements. "This child is going to be a handful," she told Rowan one night, pressing his hand against her belly so he could feel the kicks. "Feel that? They're already trying to escape. Takes after their mother then. Stubborn and determined." He kissed her swollen belly. "But we'll love them anyway." In February, 3 weeks before the baby was due, Evelyn woke in the night with her first contractions. Maria took charge immediately, sending Thomas racing to town for the midwife while she boiled water and prepared the bedroom. Rowan paced like a caged animal, useless and terrified, until Maria finally gave him the job of timing contractions just to keep him occupied. The labor lasted 14 hours, long and difficult but not dangerous. Evelyn endured with gritted teeth and Maria's steady encouragement, squeezing Rowan's hand so hard she left bruises. When their son finally arrived just after dawn, red-faced and squalling, she felt something in her heart expand beyond any boundary she'd known. "He's perfect," Rowan whispered, staring at the tiny bundle Maria placed in his arms. "Evelyn, he's perfect." "Let me see him," she demanded, exhausted and exhilarated. When Rowan carefully transferred their son to her arms, Evelyn looked into dark eyes that were exactly like his father's and felt the last piece of her life click into place. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." They named him James Rowan Calloway, after the foreman who'd been like family and the father who'd claimed him. James the elder cried when told, though he denied it fiercely. Maria declared the baby the most beautiful child ever born, despite his rather squashed appearance. The ranch hands took turns holding him with surprising gentleness. These rough men transformed into soft-spoken admirers of a 7-pound infant. Evelyn's mother arrived in early April, when baby James was 6 weeks old and the valley was dressed in spring glory once again. Evelyn met her at the train station, anxious and uncertain, the baby bundled in her arms. Her mother had aged visibly, more gray in her hair, new lines around her mouth and eyes. But when she saw Evelyn, her face crumpled with emotion. "My dear girl," she whispered, pulling Evelyn into a careful embrace that minded the baby between them. "I've missed you so terribly." "I've missed you too, Mama. Let me see him. Let me see my grandson." Her mother's hands shook as she took baby James, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, Evelyn, he's beautiful. He has your father's chin, you know, that same stubborn set." The visit was not without its awkward moments. Evelyn's mother clearly struggled with the rustic reality of ranch life. The early mornings, the simple food, the men at the dinner table who spoke frankly and sometimes crudely. But she made genuine effort to understand, to see what her daughter loved about this life. She helped Maria in the kitchen, learning to make tortillas with fumbling hands. She walked the property with Rowan, asking intelligent questions about cattle management and land use. She held her grandson for hours, singing Boston lullabies that Evelyn remembered from her own childhood. On the last evening before her departure, Evelyn's mother asked to speak with her privately. They sat on the porch in the gathering dusk, the valley peaceful around them. "I owe you an apology," her mother began. "A real one, not just words in a letter. When your father died and we lost everything, I was so frightened. I thought the only safety came from marrying well, from maintaining social position. I couldn't see that there were other kinds of security, other ways to build a life." "You were doing the best you could," Evelyn said gently. "Perhaps. But my best wasn't good enough for you. You needed support and courage, and I gave you fear and pressure instead." She took Evelyn's hand. "You've built something extraordinary here. A real partnership, real love, real purpose. You've become the woman I always hoped you'd be, despite my attempts to make you into someone else. I couldn't have done it without Rowan, without this place." "No, darling. You had it in you all along. You just needed the space to let it emerge." Her mother smiled through tears. "Your father would be so proud. I'm proud. I'm sorry it took me so long to say so." They cried together, healing wounds that had festered too long. When Evelyn's mother left the next day, it was with promises to return, to maintain their relationship, to be the grandmother little James deserved. "She's not so terrible," Rowan said, watching the train pull away. "Bit stiff, but she clearly loves you." "She's learning. We both are." Evelyn shifted James to her other hip. "Learning that love means accepting people as they are, not as you wish they'd be." The years that followed unfolded with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. 18 months after James came Catherine, a dark-eyed daughter with her mother's stubborn chin and her father's quiet intensity. 2 years later, Daniel completed their family, a cheerful baby who smiled at everything and everyone. The ranch grew along with their family. Rowan's careful management and Evelyn's sharp business sense expanded Silver Creek's reputation and profitability. They bought adjacent land, increased the herd, hired more hands to manage the growing operation. Evelyn did start a modest consulting practice, advising other ranchers on accounting and negotiations. Work she could do from home while raising the children. Maria aged gracefully, eventually retiring from most kitchen duties to focus on spoiling the children and offering advice nobody asked for but everyone needed. James the foreman married a widow from town and moved into a small house on the ranch property. Thomas saved enough to buy his own land and started a neighboring ranch, remaining close friends. Carlos and Miguel eventually returned to Mexico to help their aging mother, though they visited every few years with stories and gifts. The children grew wild and happy, learning to ride before they could properly walk, helping with ranch work as soon as they were able, attending the school that opened in Ventura when enough families demanded it. James Jr. became his father's shadow, serious and responsible. Catherine was all fire and determination, insisting on doing everything her brothers did and usually doing it better. Daniel charmed everyone he met and could talk his way out of any trouble he created. Evelyn's mother visited twice a year, gradually becoming comfortable with ranch life, even learning to appreciate its simple beauties. Anna came when she could, bringing her own family eventually. She'd married her patient man and had 3 children of her own. The cousins ran wild together during these visits, filling the valley with shouts and laughter. Through the years, Rowan and Evelyn's partnership only deepened. They weathered hard times, drought years, cattle disease, market crashes that tested their reserves. They celebrated good times, record sales, successful harvests, their children's milestones. They supported each other through grief when Maria finally passed peacefully in her sleep at 83. When James the foreman followed a year later. When Evelyn's mother died quietly in Boston with Evelyn at her bedside. They grew older together, silver threading through Rowan's dark hair, lines deepening around Evelyn's eyes. But they also grew more themselves, more confident, more certain, more grateful for what they'd built. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Rowan took Evelyn back to the Ventura train station. The building had been updated and modernized, but the bench where she'd sat that desperate day still stood on the platform. "Sit with me," Rowan said, guiding her to that same spot. They sat side by side, looking out at the town that had grown around them, holding hands worn by 2 decades of work and love. "You know what I realized?" Rowan said quietly. "That day I found you here, I thought I was saving you, but really, you saved me." "We saved each other," Evelyn corrected. "That's what love does." "No," he insisted. "I was so closed off before you came, just working, just surviving, never really living. You opened something in me I thought was dead. You showed me what life could be when you let yourself feel it, risk it, build it with someone else." Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me a place to belong when I thought I'd never belong anywhere again. You gave me purpose and partnership and a love I didn't know existed. So we're both better for having met. Infinitely better." She looked up at him. "And infinitely grateful. If I had to lose everything in Boston to find this life with you, I'd make that trade 1,000 times over. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. Because we faced them together." A train whistle sounded in the distance. They watched it approach, watched passengers disembark and embark, watched lives intersecting and diverging on this same platform where their own story had begun. "Do you ever wonder about the woman who wrote that fraudulent letter?" Evelyn asked. "About why someone would do that to a stranger?" "Sometimes, but mostly I'm just grateful they did." At her surprised look, he smiled. "I know that's terrible. Someone hurt you deliberately. But if they hadn't, you wouldn't have been sitting on this bench. I wouldn't have found you. None of this would have happened. So evil becomes good through unintended consequences?" Maybe. Or maybe there's no such thing as pure evil or pure good. Just actions that ripple out in ways nobody can predict. That letter was cruel, but it brought you to me. So what does that make it? Evelyn considered this. A thread in a larger tapestry. Individual threads can be dark or light, but the pattern they create together is something else entirely. You always were better with words than me, and you were always better at seeing the big picture. She squeezed his hand. We balance each other. They sat until the sun began its descent toward the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Then they walked hand in hand back to the wagon where their life waited. Children to feed, a ranch to run, another day to live in the home they'd built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. The years continued their steady march. The children grew into adults with lives of their own. James Jr. took over increasing responsibility for the ranch, eventually marrying a teacher from town and building his own house on Silver Creek land. Catherine shocked everyone by going east to college, then shocked them further by returning with a degree in agriculture and revolutionary ideas about scientific ranching. Daniel became a lawyer in San Francisco, but visited often, bringing city polish and country roots in equal measure. Grandchildren arrived. First James's 2 daughters, then Catherine's son, then Daniel's twin girls. The ranch house filled again with young voices, though now Evelyn and Rowan were the aging advisors rather than the young strivers. They stepped back gradually, letting the next generation lead while they supported and guided. Evelyn published a book on ranch management and accounting that became required reading for agricultural students across California. Rowan was elected to the County Board of Supervisors, using his position to advocate for fair treatment of ranch workers and sustainable land use. Together, they became respected elders of the community, people whose opinions mattered and whose door was always open. In their 70s, they finally slowed down. They spent mornings on the porch watching the valley wake up, afternoons reading or walking the property they knew so intimately, evenings surrounded by family who visited in rotating waves. Their bodies hurt more, moved slower, but their minds stayed sharp and their love stayed strong. "Do you have any regrets?" Evelyn asked one evening. They sat on that same porch where Rowan had first asked about the bookkeeping, where he'd proposed, where they'd spent thousands of evenings watching the sunset. Rowan considered the question seriously. "I regret not being able to do more for Anna before San Francisco. I regret every animal we lost to disease or drought. I regret the times I was too focused on work to really see you." He paused. "But the big things? The important choices? No regrets. You? I regret the years I wasted in Boston trying to be someone I wasn't. I regret not standing up to my mother sooner. I regret every moment I doubted myself." She smiled. "But choosing you, coming here, building this life, those were the best decisions I ever made. Even when we fought about expanding the herd in '97, even then, you were right, incidentally. We should have expanded. I know I was right. You admitted it eventually. After 2 years of sulking." "I don't sulk. I brood thoughtfully." She laughed, the sound still young despite her aged voice. "However you want to describe it, we survived it. We survived everything together." "That's the secret, isn't it?" Rowan took her hand, their fingers interlacing in a gesture they'd repeated 10,000 times. "Not avoiding the hard times, but choosing to face them as a team, building something bigger than either of us alone could create." On a spring morning in their 80th year, when the valley bloomed with wildflowers and the creek ran high with snowmelt, Rowan didn't wake up. Evelyn found him beside her, looking peaceful, his hand still reaching toward hers in sleep. Her heart broke even as she understood. This was what they'd promised each other. A life lived fully, together until the end. The funeral drew hundreds of people, ranchers and businessmen, politicians and teachers, workers whose lives Rowan had touched through decades of quiet kindness. They stood in the valley he'd loved, beneath the sky that had witnessed his entire life, and celebrated a man who'd lived with integrity and died with dignity. Evelyn stood straight through it all, supported by her children and grandchildren, grieving but not destroyed. She'd known this day would come eventually. They both had. The pain was real and deep, but so was the gratitude for every year they'd had. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and engaged despite her grief. She taught her granddaughters the bookkeeping skills that had saved her life. She told them stories about that day at the train station, about choosing courage over comfort, about building a life from nothing. She wanted them to understand that their own strength could carry them through anything, that love was worth every risk. When her time came, she went quietly in her sleep like Rowan had, her room filled with photos of their life together. Her children found her with a smile on her face, clutching the wedding ring she'd never removed. They buried her beside Rowan on a hillside overlooking the valley, beneath an oak tree they'd planted together 50 years before. The stone was simple. Rowan and Evelyn Calloway, partners in all things, 1856 to 1936 and 1860 to 1939. But their legacy lived on in ways no stone could capture. In the ranch that still bore their name, now run by the 4th generation. In the business practices that had become industry standard. In the scholarship fund they'd established for young women seeking education. In the memories carried by dozens of people whose lives they'd touched. Most of all, it lived in the story their children and grandchildren told. Of a woman stranded at a train station and a man who asked a simple question, of courage found in desperate moments, of two people choosing each other across a chasm of circumstance and building a bridge of love that carried them both home. On the anniversary of Rowan's death each year, the family gathered at that hillside grave. They told stories and shared memories, passed down the history so new generations would understand where they came from. And every time someone would mention the train station, the chance meeting, the impossible luck that brought two lost souls together at exactly the right moment. "It wasn't luck," Evelyn's great-granddaughter said one year, a young woman who just graduated from college with a business degree inspired by her great-grandmother's book. "It was choice." She chose to accept help when she needed it. He chose to offer it without expectation. They kept choosing each other every day after that. That's not luck. That's love. The words carried across the valley on the wind, mixing with bird song and the distant lowing of cattle, the creek's endless music and the whisper of grass. The valley had witnessed their entire story. The beginning at the train station, the middle of building and growing, the end of peaceful rest. It held their memory in its soil and streams, in the trees they'd planted and the fences they'd mended, in every inch of land they'd worked and loved. And in that valley, beneath that oak tree, two people who'd been strangers on a November evening in 1882 lay side by side forever. Their story complete but never really ending. Because the best stories don't end, they transform, passing from one generation to the next, teaching lessons about courage and choice and the transformative power of asking someone where they're headed when they're lost. Sometimes the bravest journey begins with a simple question. Sometimes the answer changes everything. And sometimes, when you're sitting on a train platform with nowhere to go and someone offers you a chance, the right choice is to take their hand and see where it leads. For Evelyn and Rowan, it led to everything that mattered, to home and family, partnership and purpose, a life built from nothing into something extraordinary. It led them exactly where they needed to go, not to the destination they'd planned, but to the one they discovered together. And in the end, that made all the difference.